When most people hear the word tarot, certain visuals come to mind. A way to peek into the future, a spread on a table, a candle, a question you're not supposed to ask aloud, a card that lands a little too accurately, and that feeling of, okay, that was weird. And to be fair, that is how tarot is used today, very often. But here's the quiet problem. If tarot is telling the future, why do the best readings feel less like prophecy and more like recognition? Why do they so often land on patterns you're already living, relationships you're already repeating, fears you already avoid, desires you already rationalize? Almost like the cards aren't showing you what will happen, almost like they're showing you what's already happening, but from a different angle. And if you've ever had a reading that felt uncomfortably precise, you know the strange part isn't the information, it's the timing. It's the way a symbol can slip past your defenses and say, hey, this thing you've been calling circumstances, it might actually be a pattern, which is always a great moment to discover you have an inner HR department and it's been ignoring your complaints for years. So tonight, we're going to get to the bottom of these sometimes mysterious tools of prophecy and ask, what were the tarot cards actually designed to represent? And to answer that, we're going to use a framework that treats tarot less like fortune machine and more like a map of consciousness, the law of one. One more thing before we begin. This episode is going to breathe. Because in the law of one material, tarot isn't a side topic. It's a major architectural piece of how mind, body, and spirit are described to function under what Ra calls the veil, the condition where you don't automatically remember who you are, why you're here, or what you've already learned. And if that sounds abstract, that's fine. We'll do our best to translate it in plain human terms, one step at a time. Ra makes a distinction that's so blunt, it's almost easy to miss. Before talking about tarot as divination, Ra says they must first divorce the tarot as a method of divination from the major arcana as a representation of 22 archetypes of the archetypical mind. That's a big deal because it means that in this framework, tarot is not fundamentally future telling. It's a symbolic language designed to depict deep structures of mind. Ra is even more explicit. They say that in and of themselves, the major arcana have no rightful place in divination, but are tools for further knowledge of the self by the self, for entering a more acutely realized present moment. So when people today ask, is tarot real? In this model, the answer is more like, yes, but not in the way you think. Not real as in predicts external events, but real as in depicts internal dynamics. And those internal dynamics can absolutely shape what you choose, what you repeat, and what you become, which, over enough time, can look a lot like fate. Because if your inner world keeps generating the same fears, the same coping strategies, the same relationship reflexes, the future starts looking suspiciously like a rerun. Humanity's greatest spiritual tradition, rebooting the same lesson with a new hairstyle. So, in this lens, tarot isn't primarily a telescope, it's a mirror that shows you your orientation, which is less mystical reveal and more, that's what I've been doing. Ra claims tarot did not originate as cards. It originated as a product of many generations of work on what they call the archetypical mind, developed in their own third density experience. And Ra says plainly that this work produced the tarot, which they use as a training aid in developing what they call the magical personality. They also confirm a key hypothesis that those early beings who began to penetrate the veil gain insight into the archetypical mind and the veiling process, and from that designed tarot as a method of teaching others. So, tarot, in this account, starts as a structured teaching system about consciousness under conditions of veiling, and then, historically, it changes. It seems like that's a pattern in these episodes. Ross says that they came to this planet and taught the Egyptians about these archetypes. The teaching method was primarily oral and visualization based, and later students drew images and eventually began using cards bearing representations, creating the major arcana tarot images. They also say the minor arcana and court cards were later additions, products of influence from Chaldea and Sumer. And there's a fascinating nuance here. Ra describes how, when the archetypes get shuffled into the mix of astrologically oriented court and minor arcana, the archetypal images can become magnetized to the psychic impressions of the practitioner, creating a linkage that can produce seemingly interesting results for the questioner. When the archetypes are shuffled into the mix of astrologically oriented cards, which form the so called core arcana and minor arcana, these archetypes become magnetized to the psychic impressions of the one working with the cards, and thusly become instruments of a linkage between the practitioner of the astrological determinations and divinations and the one requesting information. Oftentimes, such archetypical representations will appear in such a manner as to have seemingly interesting results, meaningful in configuration to the questioner, and in of themselves, the major arcana have no rightful place in divination, but rather are tools for the further knowledge of the self by the self, for the purpose of entering a more profoundly, acutely realized present moment. So, in this view, the major arcana are the design archetypal system, the engine. The divinatory effect can arise through the practitioner's impressions and the hybridization with astrology style correspondences. But the core purpose remains study of the archetypical mind. This is important because it sets up the central reframe. If the major arcana is the real engine, then tarot isn't a random oracle. It's a designed symbolic map. And if it was designed, then it has structure. And if it has structure, then we can study it like a language, which is unfortunate news for anyone hoping enlightenment comes in a three-card spread and a coupon. The word archetype gets thrown around a lot. People hear it and think character types: the hero, the villain, the trickster, the mother, the sage. But Ra uses archetype in a deeper, more structural way. They describe archetypes as concept complexes, not simple meanings, and they stress that each archetype is not a slogan, but an integrated structure. And Ra is almost aggressively clear about something else. To attempt to condense the archetypes is an error. They even use an analogy. It's like breaking water into hydrogen and oxygen, useful for analysis, but you lose the waterness if you forget it's one integrated thing. So if you've ever seen tarot reduced to this card means heartbreak, this card means money, this card means betrayal, that's not what we're doing here. That approach might still be useful as a folk method, but it's not what Raw is talking about. This is slower, more contemplative, more like learning a language than memorizing definitions. And it also explains something many people quietly sense. A quote unquote good tarot reading doesn't feel like someone handing you facts. It feels like someone handing you a symbol, and your own deeper mind starts completing the sentence, which is great until you realize your deeper mind is not always polite, and it doesn't believe in soft launches. So if the archetypes already seem intense, you're absolutely correct. You're getting thrown into the deep end on this one. In the Law of One, the mind body spirit complex is the basic unit of a being like you. A person consists of a mind, a body, and a spirit, thus forming a mind body spirit complex. That's perhaps the easiest concept you'll find in this episode. And Ra explicitly frames the tarot archetypes into three groups of seven: the mind cycle, cards 1 through 7, the body cycle, 8 through 14, the spirit cycle, 15 through 21, and then the final concept complex, the choice. That's the architecture. Ross says the archetypical mind informs thoughts which then may have bearing on mind, body, or spirit. But the archetypes themselves do not directly link to body or spirit. They must be drawn up through the subconscious into the conscious mind. In other words, this is not a mechanical diagram. It's not like pressing a spiritual button and getting a spiritual result. It's a symbolic structure that becomes alive only through the conscious mind engaging it, which is why tarot can feel powerful, but also a little slippery, because it's not pushing you, it's inviting you. It's offering an image that your own inner world can use to reveal itself without being forced. And if you're wondering why a system would be built like that, it's the same reason therapy doesn't work when you're dragged into it. Consciousness can't be bullied into transformation. It can, however, be gently cornered by symbolism until it admits what it's been doing, which is much more efficient and much more uncomfortable. We've talked about structure. Now we enter the structure. The 22 archetypes are not random images. They are arranged in three cycles of seven: mind, body, and spirit, with the 22nd archetype standing apart as the choice. The first seven deal primarily with perception and will. The next seven deal with incarnation and action. The final seven deal with the deeper, timeless aspects of being. And the key is this: each cycle follows the same rhythm: matrix, potentiator, catalyst, experience, significator, transformation, great way. Not as a rigid formula, but as a recurring pattern of how consciousness unfolds. Let's walk through them carefully. Also, what I want to do is to show the images that most of us are familiar with for each representation. But then I will show each image as Ra describes them to be. I will give a quick definition of each and an attached real world example. Firstly, the mind cycle. Number one, the matrix of the mind, the magician. Ra describes this as the consciousness mind itself, unmoved, yet the activator of all mental activity. It is the from which all comes, the foundational container of awareness and will. It is the blank slate, not empty, but available. The field of attention before it chooses what to focus on. You experience this when you gather yourself and decide, I am doing this. An example, the startup founder staring at a blank whiteboard, channeling raw intention into a business plan. You come across this as that aha spark of focused willpower when you decide to learn a skill, e.g., coding a new app, despite zero prior knowledge. This is not knowledge yet, it is willingness, the quiet, dangerous power of deciding. Number two, potentiator of the mind, the high priestess. If the magician is the flashlight, the high priestess is the ocean behind it. Ra describes this as the unconscious mind, vast, deep, not fully accessible, but potentiating all experience. It does not shout, it waits, it charges meaning. An example, scrolling late at night and stumbling on a forgotten memory or dream inspired insight that suddenly clarifies a life decision, or meeting a deeply intuitive therapist who sees your hidden patterns without you saying very much. This archetype reminds you you are not thinking alone. Your thoughts float on something deeper, and that deeper thing has opinions. Number three, the catalyst of the mind, the empress. Catalyst is what acts upon the conscious mind. It is what disturbs equilibrium. It is input that forces movement. Not all catalyst feels noble, but all of it asks something of you. An example, a heated political debate on social media, or a profound novel that shatters your assumptions about relationships. You perceive it when a podcast episode on psychology leaves you questioning your entire worldview. Catalyst doesn't change you, it confronts you. What you do with it becomes the story. Number four, experience of the mind, the emperor. Experience is catalyst digested. It is the structure built from reaction, the pattern that forms after repetition. An example, that ingrained trust issue of past breakups that colors every new date, or a veteran mentor at work whose accumulated expertise makes them a rock solid advisor in crises. Experience is not neutral, it solidifies, it becomes architecture, and architecture influences perception. Number five, significator of the mind, the Hierophant. This is the signature of the mind, the embodied identity, the living philosophy. An example, a university professor or spiritual teacher who doesn't just lecture, but lives a philosophy, becoming a living symbol of disciplined knowledge. You encounter it in someone whose personal code of ethics defines how they navigate moral dilemmas. This is where identity stabilizes, where belief becomes posture, where I think quietly turns into I am. Number six, transformation of the mind. The lovers, two paths. Transformation is decision, a fork, a polarity. Ra connects this archetype deeply with choice and orientation. An example, the moment you quit a soul crushing corporate job to pursue art, fully aware it's a point of no return, or choosing forgiveness over resentment in a toxic friendship, a clear bifurcation in your mental trajectory. This is not small. This is the point where you can't go back to not knowing. Number seven, the great way of mind, the chariot. The culmination of the mind cycle, directed will, integrated perception, forward motion with awareness. An example, a TED Talk speaker or elite athlete who has trained their focus to an almost superhuman level, navigating chaos with calm precision. You see it in the entrepreneur who turns vision into empire without losing their center. The mind no longer reacts, it directs. Now let's get into the body cycle. This is incarnation, action, discipline, manifestation. Consciousness enters form. Number eight, the matrix of the body, strength, balanced working, the baseline functioning of the body, homeostasis, equilibrium. An example, your body's natural rhythm during a morning run, muscles firing, breath steady, no overthinking, just pure physical equilibrium in motion. The body does not ask permission, it operates. Number nine, potentiator of the body, the hermit, wisdom, inner bodily intelligence, judgment refined through experience. An example, the yoga instructor or physical therapist who intuitively knows exactly how to adjust your posture for maximum benefit, or that quiet inner voice saying, rest now, after pushing too hard at the gym. The body remembers, even when you don't. Number 10, catalyst of the body, wheel of fortune, physical turning points, cycles, events that force bodily learning. An example, a sudden injury from overtraining that forces you to rethink your fitness routine, or winning the lottery and having to manage newfound physical luxuries and temptations. The body learns through change, often abruptly. Number 11, experience of the body, justice, the enchantress, embodied balance, lessons integrated physically. Example, a seasoned chef whose hands know the perfect timing for a dish from years of trial and error, or the way your body remembers how to ride a bike after decades. Skill becomes instinct. The body carries wisdom. Number 12, significator of the body, the hanged man, the martyr. The body as symbol, as sacrifice, as perspective shifts. An example, the athlete who sits out a season with an injury to heal properly, gaining deeper wisdom, or a minimalist who sacrifices material comforts for freedom of movement. Sometimes embodiment requires surrender, and surrender rarely looks glamorous. Number 13, transformation of the body, death, profound physical change, release, rebirth. An example, major weight loss or major surgery that fundamentally rewrites your physical identity, or recovering from near fatal illness and emerging with a completely different relationship to your body. Not annihilation, reconfiguration. Number 14, great way of the body, temperance, the alchemist, harmony, sustainable mastery. An example, the ultra marathon runner who has optimized diet, training, and recovery into effortless flow, or a biohacker fine tuning their body with science and intuition for peak performance. Balance becomes art. Now we get into the spirit cycle, meaning, transcendence, mystery, integration. We move beneath personality. Number 15, matrix of the spirit, the devil, primeval darkness, the foundational darkness, not evil, but unknown, the unlit chamber of meaning. An example, the existential dread during a dark night of the soul, for example, after losing everything, where everything feels empty yet pregnant with possibility. Darkness is not absence, it is potential. Number 16, potentiator of the spirit, the tower, lightning, sudden illumination, shattering insight. An example, a psychedelic trip or near death experience that instantly rewires your sense of reality, or the lightning bolt realization during meditation that dissolves ego illusions. Destruction and revelation arrive together. Number 17, catalyst of the spirit, the star, faith, hope, guiding light. An example, reading a story of someone overcoming impossible odds and feeling renewed spiritual motivation, or the quiet inner knowing during crisis that everything is working out. Faith catalyzes movement through darkness. Number 18, experience of the spirit, the moon, illusory terrain, mystery, veiled experience. An example, vivid dreams or synchronicities that feel otherworldly, revealing hidden spiritual layers, or navigating spiritual bypassing in a community where illusions abound. Not everything spiritual is clear. Sometimes it's a fog. Number 19, significator of the spirit, the sun, radiant clarity, vital spiritual identity. An example, that post meditation glow where everything feels connected and luminous, or meeting a truly enlightened teacher whose presence radiates unconditional love. Spirit stabilized as joy. Number 20, transformation of the spirit, judgment, sarcophagus, spiritual rebirth, resurrection. An example, a profound ego death during a retreat, followed by a complete shift in how you relate to the divine, or the moment a long term spiritual practice clicks into effortless being. The old self dissolves, something quieter emerges. Number 21, great way of the spirit, the world, the universe, unity, contact with the all. An example, the mystic or artist who creates works that feel like they channel the cosmos itself, or that rare state of cosmic consciousness where you feel at one with the universe while walking in nature. Not escape, participation. The 22nd archetype, the choice, the fool. Ra describes this as the great unifying archetype of free will, the leap, the orientation. It pairs with the significator. It is both beginning and culmination. An example, the digital nomad who sells everything to travel the world with no plan, trusting the universe, or deciding in a moment of crisis to forgive and help your enemy instead of seeking revenge. The pure choice that defines your path. The choice is not a one time event, it is the subtle, repeated alignment of your will. And tarot, in this lens, is not predicting your path, it is revealing the direction you are already walking. Ra is asked whether they have a quote unquote lesson plan or training course for the 22 archetypes. And the answer is yes, and it's structured. Stage one, study in triplets, mind, body, spirit, in the same position. First, the archetypes are presented in this order: 1, 8, 15, 2, 9, 16, 3, 10, 17, 4, 11, 18, 5, 12, 19, 6, 13, 20, 7, 14, and 21, and lastly, 22. The purpose of this ordering is simple. You compare the same functional role across mind, body, and spirit. So instead of studying one archetype in isolation, you study the matrix of the mind, the matrix of the body, the matrix of the spirit, and you look for resonance. You begin drawing tentative conclusions about how consciousness expresses itself differently in thought, incarnation, and spiritual orientation. It's less pull a card and more conduct a structural analysis. Our first stage was the presentation of the images, one after the other, in the order just given. In this way, the fundamental relationships between mind, body, and spirit could begin to be discovered. For as one sees, for instance, the matrix of the mind in comparison to the matrices of body and spirit, one may draw certain tentative conclusions. Stage 2, study in pairs. After mastering those visualizations and classifications, the next phase is pairing within each group of 7: 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 by itself, 6 and 7. And the same pattern is applied to body and spirit cycles. One important nuance: the significator is left unpaired in the normal sense because it becomes deeply involved with archetype 22, the choice. In other words, the self and its orientation are studied together, not abstractly, but practically. When, at length, the student had mastered these visualizations and had considered each of the 7 classifications of archetype, looking at the relationships between mind, body, and spirit, we then suggested consideration of archetypes in pairs: 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5, 6 and 7. You may continue in this form for the body and spirit archetypes. You will note that the consideration of the significator was left unpaired, for the significator shall be paired with archetype 22. Stage 3, learning to become the archetype. Finally, the student moves beyond analysis. The instruction becomes learn to become each archetype, to consciously inhabit its stance, to recognize when adopting that posture would be spiritually helpful and when it would distort perception. And then comes the grounding statement: there is no dogma to offer. Each perceives what is needful and helpful to the self. So, in the Law of One framework, tarot study isn't memorizing meanings, it's comparing structures, studying relationships, practicing embodiment, which is a beautiful curriculum, and also the opposite of how most of us learned literally anything in school. At the end of this line of inquiry, the student was beginning to grasp more and more deeply the qualities and resonances of each archetype. At this point, using various other aids to spiritual evolution, we encourage the initiate to learn to become each archetype, and most importantly, to know as best as possible within your illusion when the adoption of these archetypes persona would be spiritually or metaphysically helpful. As you can see, much work was done creatively by each initiate. We have no dogma to offer. Each perceives that which is needful and helpful to the self. So, why does tarot work as divination? This is where we need to be careful because we can acknowledge people's experiences without making claims we can't responsibly ground. Law acknowledges divination effects in the hybridized system, but insists on separating that from what the major arcana is actually for. So, how can tarot feel predictive? A ground explanation without metaphysical certainty is this: humans are pattern machines. We live inside repeating emotional loops. We choose similar relationships, similar avoidances, similar defenses. A symbolic system that mirrors those dynamics can appear prophetic because it highlights the trajectory you're already on. In other words, tarot doesn't have to see the future to show you the future you're currently building. And if you change your orientation, your choice, the prediction breaks, which is kind of the point. Nothing ruins fate like personal responsibility. In this next part, I want to be a little bit practical. If you want to use tarot in a way that aligns with this archetypal approach, here's a method that stays grounded. Number one, don't ask what will happen. Ask what is happening in me. Instead of will this relationship work, you can try what archetypal pattern am I repeating in how I attach? If the deck could talk, it would probably say, I'm not your lawyer, I'm your mirror. Step two, use spreads as structure, not fate. A simple three-card structure. Matrix. What is my conscious stance right now? Potentiator. What is moving underneath that I'm not emitting? Catalyst. What pressure is life applying to reveal this pattern? Then, only after that, ask, what would an integrated experience look like? Step three, look for polarity, not outcomes. For any card that lands hard, ask two questions. How would this express as service to others? How would this express as service to self? Not as moral judgment, as an orientation check, because all paths lead back to the creator. Step four, end with the choice. Always bring it home to agency. What is the most honest choice I can make next? Not the biggest, not the cleanest, the most aligned. Because the most aligned choice is rarely the one that flatters you. Why was this system created at all? Ra says their peoples used tarot as a training aid in developing what they call the magical personality, as we described earlier. And they show how their teaching method began as sustained visualization and direct mouth to ear transmission, long before cards existed as physical objects. Later, students began drawing the images, and eventually the system condensed into one visualization per card. So, tarot, in this model, is not originally a deck. It's a teaching architecture, a compression tool, a way to hold complex inner dynamics in a single image so the conscious mind can engage them without needing to already speak the language of the archetypes fluently. Because symbols bypass the rational gatekeeper. They don't argue, they don't explain, and they land first in the subconscious, which is why tarot can feel intimate. Not because it knows you, but because you know you, deeper than you admit. And your subconscious has been waiting in the lobby with a file folder labeled, We Need to Talk. It's been very patient about it too. If you came into this episode thinking tarot was about the future, I'm not here to take that away from you. People have experiences, some are hard to explain cleanly, but the Law of One offers a different lens. That the real power of tarot isn't prediction, it's orientation. Orientation means something simple, but not easy. It means where you are aimed, not what you say you want, not what you hope will happen, not what you'd like to be true on your best day. It means what your attention returns to again and again, what you keep feeding, what you keep excusing, what you keep calling just how life is. And if that sounds like pressure, it's not meant to be. It's meant to be clarifying, because a lot of suffering comes from trying to change outcomes while leaving orientation untouched. You can change jobs, cities, partners, beliefs, aesthetics, and still bring the same inner posture into every new room. And then you're shocked when the room feels familiar. It turns out fresh start doesn't uninstall the operating system. In this framework, tarot is useful precisely because it slows you down long enough to notice what's actually happening inside of you before you turn it into a plan or a narrative or a justification. It's not about control, it's about contact with the way you interpret, contact with what you avoid, contact with what you keep circling around but never naming. And that's uncomfortable because it removes the option to stay vague. You can't just drift through the reading collecting aesthetic symbolism like souvenirs. At some point, you run into yourself, and you have to decide what you're doing with what you see. The card can show you the pattern, but it can't live your choice. That line matters because the choice isn't dramatic most of the time. The choice is usually small. It's choosing honesty over self protection, choosing compassion over the need to be right, choosing patience over the need to punish. choosing to pause instead of react, choosing to tell the truth first to yourself about what you're actually seeking. And the deeper truth is, a card can't choose that for you. No matter how accurate the reading feels, it doesn't absolve you. It doesn't authorize you. It doesn't make you innocent. It just puts the question into your hands. So if you take anything from this episode, let it be this: tarot may not be a window into your fate. It may be a language for the parts of you that already know what you're doing and are waiting for you to become honest enough to do it differently. No pressure, just an invitation to slow down, to be precise about your own life, to notice what direction you keep walking when nobody's forcing you. And if you don't resonate with tarot at all, fine. You don't need cards for this. You just need the willingness to look closely, to ask better questions, and to remember that growth is rarely about adding something new. It's often about removing what's false, gently, patiently, until what's real can stand on its own. Just a lens. Take your time with it. Thank you for watching or listening. I wish you all love, light, peace, and joy. Take care.